Hello, welcome to this video. It's the second part in my Does God Really Prohibit Homosexuality series. I do apologise that it's taken me so long to put this up, but yeah, it's quite a big undertaking and requires an awful lot of thought really to get my ideas together. But I'm basing this on really Deepak Chopra's ideas on how humans relate to God. This is not in any way changing the nature of God, but it does challenge how human beings see God. Okay, Deepak Chopra had 7 stages of knowing God. You can read about them in a better way than I can explain them probably in his book How to Know God. All right, and I would encourage people to read that because this is just a quick sort of race through my understanding of what I've read of him, and yeah, it's probably very incomplete, but hopefully there's enough here to show that that God doesn't prohibit anyone, let alone a homosexual. Okay, okay, so. It's important when we're talking about these stages to realise that this is not a ladder that you climb, okay? It's in different situations we understand God in different ways, okay? And I would think that perhaps even those of no faith would be able to relate to God perhaps at some of these stages. Okay, even if it's not necessarily seeing God in a very positive way, it's still knowing God. Okay, so yeah, this is for everyone. Okay, it's not meant to contradict a religion. Okay, it's not a new religion I'm starting here or anything like that. This is I'm using an awful lot of examples from Christianity, but there are parallels in Hinduism and probably in your religion as well if you're not a Christian, okay, or a Hindu. Okay, so yeah, it's not a ladder, it's more of a cycle. And we probably kind of dip into these ways of knowing God, or at least most of us probably dip into these ways of knowing God in different ways several times a day. Okay, it depends. I mean, you know, if you're reading the newspaper, for example, particular, you know, provocative newspapers, the tabloid press, for example, they will constantly be, you know, scapegoating people and placing blame on people and this sort of thing, and you're probably at that moment reacting to a situation at stage 1 or 2. Okay, so yeah, this is, you know, this is a very flexible thing. Okay, and I've put there a daily process really. Once we understand particularly the higher stages, we can be on the alert for when we're reacting at a lower stage, and perhaps hopefully sort of, you know, maybe challenge what the way we react. Okay, I'm only really going up to stage 4 here. Okay, I see stage 4 as absolutely pivotal in helping anyone to understand that really they're affirmed and not prohibited. Okay. All right, so before we even start on the stages, we need to understand what a paradigm is, and a paradigm is simply a worldview. Okay, when I say a worldview, it's like, you know, perhaps I mean, I spoke about in other videos, for example, about things like the age of reason and the medieval understanding of God and that sort of thing, you know, and they were quite different world outlooks. So maybe the world, you know, it's really an outlook on the world, and it kind of like depends also on what we know of science. Okay, for example, here's a typical, I've said a biblical paradigm here, but with a, you know, slight modification. It's you know, ancient Greece, you know, the ancient Greek gods, for example. And this is the flat world. Okay, in this flat world, the heavens are above us, and God is in his heaven. Okay, or if you're in ancient Greek, the gods are in their heavens, and you know, the gods literally in ancient Greece, you know, they sort of controlled human beings. They controlled their fate. Okay, and you know, very much, you know, arguing it out between themselves and creating their destiny, and, you know, almost avenging each other for by taking it out on human beings. Okay, underneath this flat world is a hell. Okay, and that is you know, a typical kind of biblical paradigm, or a worldview that you know, the main sort of protagonists and antagonists in the Bible would have seen the world. Okay, it's rather interesting as well to note that you know, certain what's the word I'm after? Certain denominations of Christianity, even, you know, up to relatively recently, still condemned people and excommunicated them for ever challenging that the world was flat, was anything other than flat. Okay, this was when, you know, they knew the world was round. The ancient Egyptians knew the world was round. You've only got to visit Abu Simbel Temple or the Abu Simbel Pyramid to know that they understood that the world was round long before anybody else did. Okay, this leads to a very primitive understanding of God. Okay, and it is important to kind of bear that in mind. Okay, here's another paradigm. Okay, once you know, the sort of accepted thought was the roundness of the world, which we know is true today. Okay, an up there image of God and a down there image of hell became kind of rather difficult to sustain, and so most of us, you know, when we read the Bible, for example, and we find, you know, allusions to God in his heavens, you know, and someone or other on the right hand side and someone or other on the left and all this sort of thing, we can kind of like shift our understanding of God, because there isn't an up there. Okay, because the world's spinning round, there isn't really an up. Okay, especially like, you know, if you're down in Australia, you know, that's, you know, where's up sort of thing. All right, so God becomes out there. Okay, somewhere out there. Okay, and hell, by definition, is also somewhere out there. Okay, and this is kind of this perception of God at stage one. Okay, in human perceptions of God. Okay, known as God the Protector. Okay, because in this world, it's chaos. It's full of random happenings, as such. Okay, and God kind of like brings them all about, as it were. Okay, it's kind of like a baby's worldview. Things happen. You know, there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for these things happening. It's totally random and chaotic. Okay, and there's almost this sense then of, you know, what did I do to deserve this? So whenever there's a world disaster, for example, it's it's kind of, you know, God doing this to me sort of thing, and there's, you know, the resultant guilt that comes from that. Okay, it's actually quite funny. I always find it quite funny. And insurance companies, for example, you know, in the world of insurance, God has obviously got a very, very bad name indeed, because you know, all the storms and tsunamis and everything else become labelled as this thing called acts of God. Okay, as if God sort of kind of can't do anything else. Okay, and we kind of have to appease this God. Okay, God is you know, it's kind of a bullying kind of stage of God. I've put here that characterized by fear. Okay, and it's also prevalent a little bit in in stage 2 as well. Okay, and especially if, you know, for the people that is kind of like aligning themselves with these two worldviews that I've talked about. Okay, and yeah, God is a bully and has to be appeased by rituals and you know, all sorts of, you know, other kind of ceremonials and practices in order to try and not let these things happen. And of course, it's not true. Okay, we have, you know, this question of, you know, why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? And it's all stemming from this kind of stage 1 idea of God. Okay, and if you never get beyond that, then kind of, you know, your view of God is necessarily limited. Okay, and I've put here God as a bully, because even after all those you know, rituals and ceremonies and stuff like that that you know, people have done and still do, still bad things happen. Okay, I spoke in my first video about the Canaanite massacre and the rituals that these Joshua's warriors went through in order to try and sort of make it appear to them as if God wasn't doing the killing, sorry, as if they weren't doing the killing, that they were just following God's instructions, and therefore all the responsibility would be on God's shoulders. And there was an episode in that story where Joshua is lamenting the fact that some of his men have been killed. Okay, he's putting it down to the fact that certain early Jewish artifacts had been stolen. Okay, part of, you know, the ritual ceremonies had been stolen, and therefore a number of a relatively very small number of Joshua's men have been killed by the Canaanites. And you know, for me, that seems like crocodile tears, really. But I spoke about that before, so, you know, go and watch video number 1. But yes, this is a very this is a knowledge of God at its most primitive. Okay, in stage 2, oh sorry, my bullets are all wrong here, but never mind. Hopefully you can adjust. Deepak Chopra calls him God the Almighty. Okay, this is slightly more advanced. Okay, God punishes people for being disobedient. He rewards the obedient. Therefore, as long as you obey his laws, okay, and his laws will, you know, sort of kind of like set them down in stone, sort of thing, then, you know, you will find favour with God. Okay, it's a bit like squabbling children, really. Okay, children, if you leave them on their own, okay, and I'm talking about very young children here, they're rather egotistic, okay, and therefore what I want is better than what you want, and I must have what I want. Okay, God wins our battles for us. You know, he's on our side. Okay, this is why quite often organised religions find certain groups of people very difficult to tolerate, as it were. Okay, and, you know, all bound up in this, we have punishment for the so-called wicked. Okay, and, you know, guilt. You know, we feel guilt, you know, for the times that we have been wicked. Okay, again, there are pros and cons of this thing here, and I'm going to quote Morrissey here because he sang a song called "I've Forgiven Jesus." Okay, and really, it's kind of like attacking this worldview, really. Okay, because actually, human beings are often, very, very aware of their own guilt. But I think he's writing this about his own sexuality here. He's been very cagey about what his sexuality is, but he is rumoured to be celibate, and this is the fact that we're actually really essentially good, okay, but we feel this guilt inside us, and particularly for a gay person who at this level, this is where the fundamentalist churches are sort of are sort of using these arguments to make gay people feel like the lowest of the low. You can be gay as long as you don't practice it, kind of thing. I've forgiven Jesus for all the love he's placed in me when there's nothing I can do with this love. Okay, this is why Ryan, I think his name is Ryan Robertson or something, I can't remember his name, sorry, but he was the one that I was talking about again in part 1 of this video series, and he was his parents suddenly realized that because of their kind of very legalistic viewpoint of God, kind of almost castrated him so that he couldn't share the love that he had inside. And I think Morrissey, he puts it beautifully there. Okay, it's a lovely thing. It's from the album I'm the Quarry. So yeah, go and listen to it. Okay, so the pros and cons of stage 2. The pros are very faithful believers. Okay, churches that kind of espouse the kind of views that I've talked about, particularly in stage 2, are often very faithful, very fervent believers. Okay, and I'm not belittling them at all. Okay, because you can't. It's a way of knowing God. It's not necessarily the way, although a lot of them will kid you that it is. Okay, and yeah, I'm saying churches, but it could be from any kind of religious denomination. Okay, wherever there is this kind of punishing the righteous, punishing the wicked, and rewarding the righteous thing. There's a lot of faith, and it's good. Okay, except that it's a step on the way. Okay. And I've put here, it's an essential part of growing up, in just the same way that egoistic children, have to go through that stage, okay? But it is only a stage, okay? It's not the be-all and end-all, okay? And, actually, when you look at children sometimes, and this, coming from someone who, works in a setting with children, okay, and has had 20 years of experience with them, this might come as a bit of a shock to say this, but sometimes that you just think there's actually no more unkind group of people than children. Okay, and in fact, one of my teachers said that to me. I'll never forget her. Actually, I was 9. I was a little bit overweight, and I went to this teacher and told her about being bullied for being overweight, and she said it. There is no more unkind a group sometimes than children. Okay, and for gay people that are growing up feeling isolated, feeling bullied, feeling lonely. Okay, and I'm using gay here, but it could be for anything. Okay, there is no more unkind a group than children, okay? And at stage 2, okay, I'm very sorry here, but it is reacting like egoistic children, okay? Because the danger here of being proven wrong is actually sort of, tantamount and very high. And, as Paul Tillich would say, at this level, you could come to the conclusion that it's not worth it, okay? If it's challenged too much, okay? They don't like anybody challenging their righteous or right view of God, okay? And I suppose that's a con really, but I haven't put it in my list, okay? It's often used to justify violence, okay? As I've talked about, in my first video, okay? It's legalistic. This is right and this is wrong, okay? Again, that could be a pro if it's used properly, okay? Because this is where we do begin to understand, especially at stage 2, that there are definitely things that we do that are right and definitely things that we do that are wrong, okay? And at this level, which is a very materialistic level, okay, somebody commented on my first video about the fact that, people, erroneously think that God lives on this materialistic plane, okay? But yes, I've kind of like lost my thought there, but yeah, it's very legalistic, okay? And there's very little room for manoeuvre, okay? I've put here the law and modern counterparts. I mean, when Jesus was walking on this planet as a human being, he did nothing but kind of criticize the law, not in order to abolish it, but to, see that it was being applied from, the heart of people and not from words on a page, okay? And he would be doing the same today. I've put here some family models, okay? It's, I think, probably rather surprising, but there's still, in some families, this idea of, the teacher, particularly the male here. I'm the teacher, what I say goes, okay? So when you have children, okay, although, yes, children have to be guided, okay, they are not your property, okay? They are human beings in their own right, okay? And all, a lot of, not under my roof and all this kind of thing. It's actually not necessary really for a parent to have that much so-called authority. And again, this is this is because going along with these stages of God as kind of like stages of authority. Okay, little children don't do bad things because they're frightened of being told off. Okay, and it kind of, it's almost at the next stage to understand that you don't do things because of what they do to the other person. Okay, and the authority kind of thing in a family model is very much to assert my kind of ego and my kind of power as leader, okay? Quite often used for manipulation as well, okay? As, taking the family model a step further, and we have, leaders of countries, okay? And you have this sort of kind of blame, punishment, threat coming from governments, and they're scapegoating minorities of people, including homosexuals, for being kind of the roots of all evil, kind of thing. The obvious one is the Holocaust, Hitler, and the Jews. Okay, but it's going on in Uganda, it's going on in Russia, and it's scapegoating. It's purely scapegoating. It's very, very frightening that people still haven't learnt you know, from lessons past. Okay, and really that kind of like goes on here. Okay, because although we have this legalistic system here, okay, of things that are righteous and things that are not righteous, if we can do something not righteous and something, quote, good comes out of it, and we think that we've got away with it, then there seems to be this lack of knowledge that everything comes home to roost. Okay, and at a spiritual level, every single action, whether it's good or bad, leaves an imprint. Okay, and this is kind of what is sort of not really fully understood, I think, at stage 2. Okay, you know, you've only got to look at what people think they can post on the internet and on social networking. The people who kind of you know, wash their dirty laundry on Facebook and think, well, actually, well, you know, no harm will come out of that, whatever, and then, you know, 10 years down the line or something comes back to bite you in the bum, you know. And I've put here, you make your world. Gandhi said, be more of what you want to see in the world. Okay, if you want people to be tolerant to you, then you be tolerant to other people. Okay, sowing and reaping, what you sow you shall reap. And really it's all bound up with karma. Okay, which, you know, it's golly gosh, it's a Hindu word. Okay, so, you know, there'll be someone who says you're not really fit to talk about the Christian world because you acknowledge that Hindus might be right as well. I do think they are right here. Okay, karma is like, it's like sort of spaghetti, really. And on a material plane, you know, karma works. Okay, but it's you know, I did another video where I explained karma more fully, but yeah, it's far deeper than just having words on a page. Okay, so here comes another paradigm. Okay, given that just seeing a flat God in the heavens, and the flat world, and then Satan underneath, as it were, or, you know, the slightly more advanced, you know, God is somewhere out there. The further out in space we go, kind of, the less room, I suppose, in science there is actually for God. Okay, and so we have to start sort of finding, you know, other ways of explaining the nature of God. Okay, so here's the world again. Okay, here are people in it. Okay, people, animals, plants. Okay, every living thing. Okay, every living thing contains within it an indestructible aspect of divinity. There is still divinity which is all embracing and is essentially God. That owl is not God. Okay, neither is that bard over there God. Okay, but within us we contain an indestructible element of divinity. Okay, Christians might call it your soul. Okay, Hindus would call it your Atma. It's your higher self. Okay, and getting to know that higher self, that aspect of divinity within you, will help you understand God. Okay, because at some point, as I hope I've kind of like laid the seeds of talking about here, that very sort of you know, stages 1 and 2 are erroneous. Okay, they are erroneous ways of knowing God, even though they're essential in terms of our development. They're not all there is. Okay, in this model you'll notice that hell has disappeared here, because of our aspects of divinity. Okay, it's all encompassing. Love, God, that is all there is. Okay, so what about hell then? We have to, you know, in the Bible it says there's hell. Well, actually in the Bible it doesn't say there's hell. Okay? In the Bible, Jesus spoke in parables. Okay? Wherever you find hell mentioned, certainly when Jesus is talking about it, it's always within the context of a parable. Parables were meant to invert the accepted social order. Okay? And Jesus spoke in terms that the people at that time could understand. And very often when the word hell is used, for example, he uses a word like Gehenna. Gehenna was actually a place. It was actually a real place. It was a very hot, arid part of the desert, and quite often when anybody ever sort of attempted to sort of travel through this area, then they kind of, died through lack of water, and and people's bones and animal bones and things were found there, and it was a pretty creepy place. Okay, but it's in the context of a parable where it's not actually saying hell is a real place. Okay, and so what is my biblical justification then for ever espousing this particular worldview? Okay, well, couple of quotes here. Okay, the sheep and the goats. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me. Okay, this is affirming the inherent divinity within each living thing. Okay, and because we are inherently divine, we cannot be both. We cannot be inherently divine and kind of like be punished with a hell. Okay, that would mean that God was a total failure. Okay, you've heard it said, love your neighbour and hate your enemy, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Okay, so at a face value, it's not for us to judge who's righteous and unrighteous. God loves, nurtures all of us. Okay? And again, it is this kind of, yes, there is the element of divine in there. There are loads of others after the parable of the sower and the seeds. It's very kind of significant that straight after that, there's the parable of the wheat and the tares. Okay, and the farmer's worker saying, well, look, there's tares here. Shall we kind of uproot the whole lot? And the farmer saying, well, no, actually don't do that, because you'll destroy what's good and what's already there. Okay. So stage 3. Gosh, I've forgotten to do my bullets on lots of these things. I do apologise. Okay, stage 3 then is the God of peace. When you understand that actually there has to be a bit more to God than just this very legalistic kind of interpretation of him. Okay, we go to God and we do it, especially people of faith, but whenever anybody, even of no faith, needs respite and needs to just to sit with themselves and sit with their thoughts, we discover the God of peace. Okay, those of you who do work in settings, in children's settings, might know of something called peer mediation. Okay, peer mediation is about training children to resolve their differences without necessarily, especially at schools, okay, without necessarily sort of bringing those differences back into the classroom and expecting it, someone who wasn't there, for example, to try and solve these things. Okay, it's about them working it out themselves. Okay, and children are trained up as peer mediators. Okay, and the key element of mediation is that no dispute is ever truly settled if any of the parties involved are unhappy by the end of it. Okay, they've all got to be sort of, kind of, in a sense, saving face. Okay, here then, there are no evil or bad, as it were, unrighteous. Okay, there are no righteous. Okay, but everybody has to be kind of satisfied with the solution. There's no judgment here. Okay, to understand God like that, you have to examine, and this has been brought home to me on a number of occasions. It's not always very comfortable, but sometimes the people that we kind of see as adversaries maybe in our lives, okay, are just you or me, as it were, in just different skin and bones. They're the same as you. Okay, the sun shines on them as well as it's shining on you. Okay, unfortunately, going back to sort of stage 2, a lot of countries and governments don't really understand that. It made me really desperately sad when I heard of the response of the Prime Minister of Israel to the Syrian bombings. Okay, if anybody attacks our allies, then we'll have our guns ready, kind of thing. Was kind of his paraphrase to take on the thing. His soundbite, as it were. Unfortunately, as I said last time, it's the voices of destruction which are heard all the time. Okay, it's not seeing your enemy as me. Okay, and I think that perhaps if the Israeli government had come out in solidarity, in true solidarity, for the victims of those terrible chemical weapons atrocities, and understood that these were their brethren, these were their brothers. Okay, it's like the parable of the prodigal son. Okay, they're my brothers and sisters. Okay, there is no barrier between them and me. Okay, as much as someone has chemically attacked other other people somewhere else in another country, they've done it to me here in England. This is and if people understood that, then it would actually go a long way to healing a situation. Okay, Jonah didn't understand that in the story of Jonah and the whale. Very often when I hear people talk in sermons or whatever on Jonah and the whale, they see it as obeying and obedience. Okay, I have never heard it, although it's just as evident to me in that story, but I've never heard it espoused from a pulpit, certainly in educational books, okay, Bible commentaries and stuff like that. Yes, you'll find this interpretation of it, but in churches it's always the obedience one. But I'm going to suggest that really this is about God going global. This is about God sending Jonah out to what is now modern day Iraq, but in those days was Nineveh, to actually say, yes, there's all this, I'm not pleased with you and your and your sinfulness and everything, but this is because it was being written from another viewpoint, okay, the viewpoint of an adversary, but the message is still there. The message is, God is saying, I want to forgive these people. I want to be known by these people. And Jonah couldn't hack it. Okay? And still today, it's all about obedience. And that side of the story, the side of it being, God going global, and it is kind of ignored because of this stage 2 mentality. Okay? The fact that somebody else who is not my religion might also be redeemed and be and be kind of, let's say, pals with my God is almost too much to bear, because that might mean that we, quote in quotes, are wrong. Okay. At stage 3, the soul becomes much more important. Okay, because we're beginning to understand that really there's a lot of, stage 1 and 2 reactions are the material world. Okay, if you want peace, it's got to be inner peace. Okay, it's got to be nurturing this and getting to know this divine element which is present in every single person. Okay, all right. It doesn't. No, I'll come on to that a bit later. But Gandhi understood this. Okay, and this is not Gandhi's quote here, but certainly someone who understood, where Gandhi was coming from. Okay, be careful in dealing with a man who cares nothing for comfort or promotion, but is simply determined to do what he believes to be right. He's a dangerous, uncomfortable enemy, because his body, which you can always conquer, gives you little purchase on his soul. Okay, Gandhi actually put that into practice. Okay, in some cases, people committed the most terrible atrocities, but these people came back and back and back. Eventually, it kind of bore fruit in a way. I'm not going to say that everything after the independence of India was lovely and whatever, but it certainly stopped the kind of rule that was going on there, which was just so unjust and so unfair. Okay, Gandhi never promised that everything would be lovely with independence of India, but he did say at least there will be our mistakes and not somebody else's. Okay, but that's a by the by. What's important here is that your soul is the important thing. Okay, and those we're now sort of getting onto the kind of the sort of outsiders of society, really, the ones that people look at and say, oh, they're slightly hippie-ish, or they're slightly weird or whatever. Okay, at stage 2, you have to be with the group. Okay, there's this group mentality. If you're not on our side, you're on somebody else's. Okay, and here you're on your own side. Okay, it becomes more evident in stage 4. Okay, stage 4, which is for me the actual key point of this, Deepak Chopra describes it as the God of redemption. Okay, when we go to God, okay, for kind of forgiveness. Now, it never ceases to amaze me, really, how sort of, I suppose, I'm going to say green evangelists, as it were. In other words, those with very little experience, except that they've gone through, some kind of miraculous kind of born again kind of conversion to a faith. Okay, particularly now here, the Christian faith here. And they expect their would-be converts to accept the crucifixion and the resurrection within 5 minutes of a conversation. And actually, it takes more than that. Okay, we have to go through these stages of development and understand them. Okay, even if today I might my outlook on God might be one of peace and restful awareness and whatever, but then I react to a situation which is more akin to something else, but I'm still knowing that there is this stage of peace. Okay, I can begin to recognize it. Okay, to come to stage 4 and to really and truthfully understand what this redemption is, it requires an awful lot of inner work. Okay, just as a by the by, there are a lot of theories about the meaning of the crucifixion and the resurrection. Okay, the Church of England doesn't officially accept a doctrine. There is one that is very often espoused and talked about, okay? To me, it goes back to a stage 1, 2 understanding, okay? There's so much wrongdoing and sin in the world that God has to punish someone for it, okay? But because he loves creation so much, because he loves people, it's his own blood which he spills and punishes, okay? But really, for me, that doesn't really cut the mustard, okay? For me, there's this other kind of theory, okay, which is that the world is so morally bankrupt, okay? The crucifixion of Jesus is really showing how morally bankrupt the world is. That act of violence was a terrible act of violence, okay? It was a terrible act of violence. One of the reasons why, this kind of, being saved by Jesus's blood kind of thing doesn't cut it with me is because nowadays we're totally immune to death. It's coming at us from our TV screens on the news, okay? Our kids play terrible games on games consoles where, even the most kind of inanimate creature like a Pac-Man or a Frogger or something has to die, and things are getting killed and we have to kill things on these games, okay? We are surrounded by death, okay? And although, yes, this is a very sacred thing we're talking about here, in that kind of culture, okay, which I'm sure in its own way wasn't all that different from Old Testament times or New Testament times or whatever, there's still this kind of death everywhere kind of thing. But we get immune to it and we kind of think, well, kind of like, so what? It was another human being dying, okay? That's not to denounce the sacredness of the story. I'm not in any way saying it's not a sacred story or it's not a true story or anything like that. I'm just saying that from our perception of it, there's almost this temptation to say, well, hold on, so what? Okay? When we understand that anyone's death is a terrible act, okay, whether it's through disease or whether it's through being killed or whatever, it's a terrible act, okay? It's showing the moral bankruptcy of our societies and the way we live, okay? And the resurrection is kind of like, you could almost be forgiven for thinking in this culture of death that evil has got its way, okay? And Jesus' resurrection, okay, and in a sense, the Hindu belief in reincarnation is saying, look, you can trick me into believing that I die all the time, okay? But actually, you can't, okay? Life goes on. Life will always triumph, okay? Because inside me is an aspect of the divine, and that aspect of the divine is actually really all there is of me. My body, my bones will rot and pass away, but still alive will be this divinity, and it cannot go away, okay? So yeah, there's a huge amount of inner work required to really get to know that and to put it into practice, okay? But it's not cynicism, okay? It can be very tiring sometimes for to live and to and to sort of chat and converse with people that see everything that's wrong with the world and are just hugely cynical about it, okay? Yes, there's always a a conspiracy theory. Yes, the news people do bend the news and all this sort of thing to show us what they want us to see and not what's really going on. And yes, we can see all that, but this isn't about that. Okay, this is about enfolding everything. So although I'm critical of reactions and perceptions of God at stages 1 and 2, I'm still understanding and enfolding them in my worldview. Okay, they are me in a different form. They're me in a different body. Okay, and I love them. Okay, I'm not blowing my own trumpet here because I'm not a perfect human being at all. But I do find, particularly as I get older, that actually I don't want to hurt anyone. Okay, I really do not want to hurt anyone. And if I do inadvertently hurt someone, then I know that's going to leave an imprint somewhere. Okay, but I'm mortified about it. I wouldn't even want somebody who's upset me to be hurt by me. Okay, and this is enfolding the world. It's not cynicism about it. Okay, neither is it going into caves in the foothills somewhere and withdrawing and from the world. It isn't. Okay, it's about listening to your thoughts, listening to and thinking and getting to what Paul Tillich would call the ground of your being. Really, it's really grappling with these questions, okay, and not brushing them under the carpet. Okay, it's uncomfortable sometimes because you've got to face yourself, and sometimes that isn't always uncomfortable. That isn't always comfortable. But look in the mirror. Okay, look in the mirror. You'll see your body. Okay, we've all got things we don't like about our body. Okay, and again, manipulation, which comes from this, very kind of stage 2 thing. We're all sort of terrified of being fat. Half the world is starving, dying of hunger, and in this Western world, we're all terrified that we're fat. We all judge our bodies. Okay, but look in the mirror long enough, and you'll start to see the real you. Okay, and this is what this is about. Okay, you have to go through all the uncomfortable layers about yourself. Okay, but you will find you. Okay, and when you find you, you will find that you are very, very close to God. Okay, even if it's only for a couple of minutes in the day. Okay, yes, as I've said, we have to live in this outside world. In the outer world. This is what Jesus meant by being in the world but not of it. Okay. It's about interacting with the world and getting to grips with it and getting your hands dirty, but at the same time understanding that it doesn't have a purchase on your soul. Okay, it's difficult. Okay, but let's go back to our growing up kind of model. Okay, all right. Thinking about a good parent, for example. Okay, a good parent knows who I am. Okay, this isn't someone who is banging down their authority and I'm the leader of this household and you're under my roof and I'll do the teaching about God in this household kind of thing. A good parent knows who I am, and I've always I'm the apple of their eye. You see, especially new parents. I'm friends with a lot of new parents, and those kids are all that's been there. And for God, there was never a time when you didn't exist. You have been there ever since sort of the very, 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 very beginning of time. And time is such a nebulous thing anyway. No one really understands what it is and can never define it. But there was never actually a point in existence where you didn't exist. There's not a point in time where you won't exist. Okay, and God knows you. God knows you inside out, knows you better than you know yourself, calls you by name, understands you, understands how you're feeling, affirms you like any kind of a parent, okay, or any kind of good parent, okay, will respect you for the decisions that you make in your life, okay. All right, this is not holding on to something that is mine at an egoistic level. This is being a creator, producing a child, for example, and putting it out there, knowing that it's good. Okay, and now you can see where I'm going. You know, for all, you know, I cry over the Jamie Roddermeyers of this world, you know, who have just been so bullied and battered because of their sexuality. Okay, you can see what I'm doing here. You know, at this redemption level, okay, you find that God is not a judge. He's not someone that you have to go to and somehow or other hope that he'll protect you. Okay, beyond the level of just trying to find a bit of respite from the world and a bit of peace and quiet from the world. Okay, and then beginning to understand that actually your neighbour is really you, your enemy is really you. Okay, that's, you know, the Good Samaritan, by the way, as well. That springs to mind. You know, who is my neighbour? Well, actually, you know, it's it's those from whatever culture Jesus is saying there. It's someone from a different religion, and the teachers of the law at that time couldn't even bring themselves to say the Samaritan. You know, who was the one who looked after this poor person lying on the road? It was the one who helped. It wasn't the Samaritan. And Jesus is saying, go away and do that for somebody else. You know, do the same thing as them. It was absolutely scandalous. Okay, and this is, you know, this is how God affirms people. Okay, it doesn't matter what background you're from, what particular social strata or social group. Okay, and once you understand that, and you know, I can't put that into practice in my life. I try, okay, and I'm not saying, you know, that I'm, you know, kind of like, you know, have reached this kind of nirvana thing, because I clearly haven't. Okay, but sometimes I do. Sometimes, just for those moments in the day, I just suddenly realize, actually, I am redeemed. I am redeemed. Because I know at the soul level that actually I haven't done anything wrong. Okay? Morrissey is saying, look, I've forgiven Jesus. Okay? There isn't really, you know, yes, that's sort of turning the whole thing on its head, kind of thing. And, you know, kind of like saying, well, look, you know, there's so much shit in this world, but, you know, and really, you know, it's not really for me to feel guilty. You know, if anyone should be forgiving anyone, you know, it's got to be kind of like a two-way thing. If, you know, if Jesus is going to forgive me, I've got to forgive him. But at the soul level, you haven't done anything wrong. You don't need redemption. You never did anything wrong. Okay? You are loved. Okay? You are a person of God, whoever you are. Okay? It's not the end of the story. It's not the end of Deepak Chopra's 7 stages. Okay? But for me, it's you know, stage 4 is this absolutely essential one for us all to kind of get to grips with, if we're going to live in this world, and if the world is ever going to be a better place. Okay, you know, it's no good saying, you know, gay people, for example, going on tweeting things about haters and stuff like that. You know, because if you're going to hate the haters, then you're going to become a hater yourself. Okay, but it's just about knowing that you, as a gay person, that person as a bisexual, that person as a transgender person, that person as a straight person, and, you know, and all of the myriads of sexuality that we are, okay, or colours of skin that we are, or religions that we are, or whatever else that we are, political parties that we are, or whatever, we're all the same. Okay, we're all loved. okay, at a soul level, okay, I'm not saying it's all right to go and gas people, you know, and throw chemical weapons at people and that sort of thing. I'm not saying that, but that, you know, the law of karma will take care of that, okay? Everybody's actions will come home to roost. Karma and, you know, what you sow you shall reap is not a blame thing. It's not a moral blame thing, okay? It's just knowing, you know, you can kind of know and find peace in knowing that actually everything, you can't do anything without it you know, being repaid for that debt, okay? Whether it's a good debt, whether you go and, you know, help an old granny across the road, or whether or not, you know, you do something really terrible to someone, like steal your granny's last cup of tea, you know, all those actions will be repaid in full, okay? That is working, that's happening, okay? I'm not judging, okay? This is the point. I'm not judging. And at a soul level, when you realise that, you suddenly realise that, you know, your soul, it is totally indestructible, it's divine, it hasn't done anything wrong, and you're okay, all right? Okay, stage 5 is about God the Creator. When you understand that you're redeemed, you can suddenly start, this is Chopra arguing now and putting across his theories, but you can suddenly start to understand that you shape the world you live in, okay? John Lennon, Yoko Ono said, imagine peace, and this is what they mean, okay? Aligning yourselves with God so much that you actually begin to shape your surroundings in a way that is truly godly, okay? Stage 6 is about the God of miracles, okay? Jesus said that we could do miracles, okay? It's a bit sort of, I don't really understand it. It now gets all scientific and quantum-y and quantum physics here, and I'm grappling with it, okay? And the God of pure being, the God of divine ecstasy, when you really understand that there is nothing but God, okay? So there you go, okay? You know, anyone, you're not prohibited, whoever you are. Thank you for listening to this. I know I've probably burbled on forever and ever, but I do think this is really important. I do hope that, you know, I'm just doing this and just putting it out there, okay? And, you know, if 100 people watch it, that's fine. If half a person watches a minute of it and decides, you know, then that's fine, okay? But yeah, I do thank you if you've ever got to the end of this. You know, really, thank you very much for watching, okay? I'm going to be back with a part 3 to this, because I do want to examine some of the stories which are being used against homosexuality in particular, okay? And just trying to get to the thrust of what they're about, okay? Again, I don't know when that would be coming up. It might be next week, or it might be next month, or next year, or whatever, but it will be there, okay? All right, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.